True or false? In 2024, a man in Devon ordered accidentally 500 turkeys for a village Christmas dinner. True or false?
I'll say
I'm going to say true. I'm going to say true.
Correct. It is true.
Because it sounded too specific to be made up.
Bit wild. Yeah, press the wrong 0 and you end up with...
Yeah.
Can you imagine?
God.
Okay, question 2. The UK Council once banned Christmas lights. True or false, Liz?
Oh, it's probably true.
You think that could have happened? Possible?
I'm going to say false on the basis that it sounds like an Express article designed to get like Islamophobia up or something like. They made us take down the Christmas lights.
It is true. It happened in
Is it?
Cambridge. Cambridge,
Oh,
yeah.
there we go.
Yeah, Cambridge. Final Christmas
There
question.
we go. There's that argument to get rid of all those councils.
Yeah.
Centralised government. Christmas has been officially cancelled and banned in the UK in British history. Christmas has been banned in the UK in British history. Aid, do you think that's ever happened in British history?
No. False.
Can't have happened. Liz?
No, I don't think so. I don't remember that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'd be shocked because it happened in 1647.
Really?
Did it? It did happen.
Yeah, under Cromwell, Puritans. They were like, this is ridiculous. You shouldn't be celebrating this stuff.
Bah humbug.
Yeah, bah
Oh
humbug.
my God, I'm a big fan
No
of. I'm a
singing.
big fan of Cromwell now. I'd quite like to get rid of Christmas. It drives me mad.
Oh dear. Oh dear.
We can't be a fan of Cromwell. He was a genocidal dick. Merry Christmas, everyone.
Walking
introduce
around the Christmas tree.
Yes, I'm Aid Thompson, internet bastard, host of the Aid Thompson and Other Disappointments podcast, and I do the alternative paper review Monday to Friday on YouTube.
And Liz, my co-host.
Hello, I'm Liz Webster, and here I am with this little Christmas rat. I have a YouTube account, Liz Webster, Save British Farming, and I do lots of things about saving British farming, which is your food, which is why you should be concerned about it, because we are what we eat, and our food is under threat, despite everyone not liking Jeremy Clarkson and Dyson.
I'm Alex, also known as Political X. I'm a YouTuber, historian, political scientist, and author. We were just off air and we were talking about Twitter, social media, Bluesky, and our sort of feelings towards it. Hey, you've come off it. You've come off X completely. You've weaned yourself off.
Well, to begin with,
what sort of spurred that on? What was the final straw?
Well, so there's the first thing that made me go, right, I'm just done. Like for a long time, I was like, how much longer am I going to be up? But like a lot of content creators, I'd built up a fairly modest following that I didn't want to just abandon. So I kept sort of thinking, well, I better stick around until they announced plans to remove the block feature, which I kind of concluded like who am I really to put up some sort of protest or to try to push back on that. But I thought if there was something, just a small thing that I could do to make my feelings known and to join the chorus of disapproval, then it would be to basically abandon it at that point, because I knew people who had like ex-partners, ex-boyfriends, ex-husbands who would really love to see what their girlfriends or ex-girlfriends or wives were up to nowadays. And those individuals had blocked them. And so to me, that felt like they were going to remove that safety catch. And so basically someone's going to end up getting really seriously hurt as a result of that. So at that point, I was like, I'm just going to come off this thing. This is getting ridiculous now. So there was that. And then when Threads and Bluesky blew up, I was like, oh, well, this is an easy decision now. I'll just, like, before that, it felt like I was going to be a cult leader. Like, I'd go like, hey, everyone, follow me this way. And then I'll go up to the top of the hill, drink all the Kool-Aid, and everyone else will go, well, that was weird that he did that all by himself. Let's go back. So you know, Bluesky made it a lot easier.
Have you found the trolling to be anywhere near the same level, if at all, on Bluesky?
No, not at all. So on X, I would routinely, habitually get abuse from people who would threaten to go digging into my past as though I'm some sort of like secret career criminal or something. I was getting what was some other weird stuff I got? Like abusive, hostile, just clapbacks from anonymous sock puppet, cartoon avatar accounts. Just when I'm talking about something innocent, like, hey, you know, I took my kids to the park earlier and it was jolly good fun. Like suddenly you'd get people going, yeah, well, you never supported Corbyn. And it's like, Jesus Christ, where's this hatred coming from? We were talking about the weather. So I don't get any of that. On
but that's the type of stuff that you were getting on X. Did you I'm going to bring you in, Liz. Did any of that ever, did you ever report that? Did anything ever happen when you did report it? Or did you not even get to the point of, I'm going to report this? And
no, I sort of look at it like, so from my perspective, as a straight white man on the internet, these sorts of things they don't generate the same fear and threat to my physical safety as it would do perhaps with somebody else. So I never personally felt like I was under threat or like I should take any of this stuff particularly seriously. It was more of a pest. It was just distorting the conversation and annoying me. So no, I didn't ever report it, but I totally understand why other people in similar situations would and have done. So yeah.
That's wild. Liz, what about yourself? Have you completely come off X? Are you considering coming off X?
No, I'm not going to come off X. No, I'm not on social media to problem solve. I'm on social media to campaign and move debate. And if I only speak to people who agree with me, then I'm not doing anything, am I? I'm just in a goldfish bowl. So part of being on Twitter, I don't like calling it X because to me it's still Twitter. I don't send an X thing. I send a tweet.
You send a tweet. Yeah.
So it's a bit of a nuisance because there's two things and I have to post the blinking things twice, and Bluesky only does a minute of video and it's quite clunky and slow. I've got my settings on X quite high, so I don't see a lot of the trolling because it just wastes my time. I do, it really is trying to get your message out there as much as possible. It's been weird recently because a lot of the people that did agree with me are coming out and being really nasty and horrible to me because I'm trying to explain why the inheritance tax on farms is bad for the country. But because they don't like Clarkson, as I said, they sort of go on to these tropes. And so it is really, until we unite as a country around our values, the people that are actually causing the change with the ideology are going to continue to win. Because I do think that the thing that split us in half was Brexit. And that was because the people that believed in Brexit wanted to believe that it was going to deliver a fantasy that they wanted. But really, we do know that when we come back to core values, and that's tested with the food standards, when you ask people, do you want chlorinated chicken?
No.
9 out of 10 people say no. And ultimately, if that question had been on the ballot paper, Brexit wouldn't have had a bloody chance. But ultimately, that's what the Brexit question was. And it still is that question. And it's still here today. So unfortunately, I think this feeling of I feel safer on Bluesky is just lefty lovey stuff, to be fair. There are trolls on there as well. And I think everybody has propensity to be a troll themselves. As to whether they're bots that come from Russia is perhaps the other thing. I've had death threats on Twitter, which I involved the police with. I think you have to be careful on social media, full stop. But I've got a very public image, and so that comes with the choice to get involved in campaigning. So it is. I think the problem with social media is it's black and white. You write something, you feel as if you've made that point and you want that point to win, and it encourages entrenchment. So that, I think, from a psychological point of view, is very difficult to win an argument, particularly when you've only got so many characters.
It's impossible.
Right. And it's the same on WhatsApp. Having a discussion on WhatsApp is really, really difficult. Whereas if you sit down and have a healthy debate like we're doing now, you can address lots and lots of issues.
I
So
don't.
I
I
think
don't.
all that
Hmm.
social media does is it serves to divide people, to cause arguments, but then it does help to organize people for a campaign to, if you do get behind the cause, to go and campaign on an issue.
I wouldn't say going over to Blue Sky is necessarily a left perspective. And the reason I cite that, and I find this very interesting, I think actually I got one of my biggest ever responses by responding to Musk on this, where I pointed out, because I keep banging on about free speech on X, and there was a newspaper owner, Julius Streicher, during World War II, who had a newspaper called Der Stürmer, and he was hauled up in front of the Nuremberg courts. And all he did, from what I can tell, from what I can tell and have read, please correct me if I'm wrong. This is to everyone who's listening. He didn't kill anyone. He just operated the newspaper, but he was highly anti-Semitic. And in the court, he tried to argue that he had the right of freedom of speech. And they still tried him and they still hung him. And I'm sort of going, and the disturbance wasn't just a newspaper. It was also posted outside on billboards around public areas. So you could walk past and read it. So it was almost like there was an element of it being like a town square news article. And I think with Twitter, I'm very mixed because, as you said, you can't have a conversation, but you can galvanize people and you can connect with people. You also have this big issue of a lot of those people just either bots or they're trolls or losers, frankly, who just go out of their way to try. Well, we know that because Swansea and Edinburgh University during the Brexit campaign said there were about 100 to 200,000 Russian bots. That's a huge number of people that are pumping out a fake message over and over again and therefore influencing people. So I take it with a pinch of salt. But the other thing, and I agree with you, if you come off there, there's also and this is why I was bringing up Disturm. If you come off there, are you therefore not engaging and pushing back on Musk and allowing him to win? Or are you in some ways enabling, like people did when they were reading Disturmer and allowing it to be posted across town centers and everything else? And that's where I get this discombobulation. That's where I'd probably push back a little bit on whether it's left or right, because I'm looking at it as a historical World War II perspective where you've got highly right wing, and I think we can all agree Musk is right wing, and he's altered the platform to allow the right to come in. I mean, we've got Alex Jones, Andrew Tate, Nigel Farage, Donald Trump, who attempted a coup. That's where I get this, like, is it really I'm having a conversation with someone and having an effect, or is it, and I should be pushing back or not?
It would be.
Well, what you do in thinking that I'm going to leave this because those people are on there and they're wrong, it makes it worse because you're not. There are a lot of soft voters on there who are influenced and open to influence that you're not going to influence because you've left it. So it's not about, do I stand? I had this exact argument over the inheritance tax, the farming campaign. Oh, these people came out. I don't like. It's not about, it's not about personalities. It's about influencing, potentially thousands, millions of people to a moderate point of view and having a counter argument to them. So somebody can sort of go, oh, yeah, okay, but I would say at the moment, most of the big influencers in terms of from journalists, especially, are not on Blue Sky. And so Twitter still has that impact, I think, or it still has that weight. And I just see Blue Sky at the moment as a sort of extra work, I guess.
I can see that it's not big enough aid.
I think for me, it comes down to two things. It's first, like, how do you perceive X to be different to the newspaper that you mentioned in the time of the war? And to me, I see it like, firstly, it's a core component of a lot of news. Like, so I used to joke, this is about like 10 years ago. I used to joke about like how most newspapers should just, like, on the front page of the newspaper, it should just say, hey, are you interested in what it said on Twitter today? Because this is what it said on Twitter. Like, you should just open the newspaper and then reread like printouts of stuff that people like Twitter spats and what this politician said. Like, Twitter controls that conversation. So do you envisage Twitter or X as being the modern day equivalent of a newspaper that seeks to educate and inform, or do you see it more likely now as a sort of mind control conversational mechanism, you know, because it's all very well, I think, like if you walk into a bar and you say, look, okay, there's lots of different people in here with different lived experiences and different political opinions, and you want to go into that bar and influence the conversation and the mindset of people in there. You have that ability because everybody in there is from a different walk of life. If you walk into a bar and the bar is owned and controlled by a guy who is quite clearly right wing and stacks the deck and tweaks the algo, as we saw in the US election campaign, there was a New York Times expose about Donald Trump, I think, or maybe it was about Don Jr. or something. There was something that exploded on the New York Times, and somebody did the analytics on it, studied it, performed all the analysis, and they were like, there's no way that this tweet from the New York Times, a verified NYT account, there's no way that this isn't being muted and frustrated. Because if you look at all of the other stuff that they do, you know, it's the NYT, like it'll for this number of retweets, it would have this number of likes. If you've got this number of retweets and likes, it would be viewed this many times. And they looked at it, they were like, it's being stunted. So when you've got an alt-right Trump adjacent figure like Musk who owns that thing and stacks the deck, I feel like if you're walking into X to try to have some sort of influence or push back on the dominance of right-wing content and sensibilities on there, I personally feel like if I went back in there to try to do that, I'd be like an ant on the patio getting sprayed away with a hose pipe. It's like I don't stand a fucking chance on it.
Give it time, Aid. Stick with it. Build that.
I think it's there. There's still a lot of people on there. A lot of people have left. I mean, my following has gone down quite a lot, but then it's still there. It's still got a presence. And I think if you want to win the war, you've got to be part. And it's not the same as World War II propaganda because there was no way of interacting underneath those publications. But I also read a lot of stuff across the board just so I can gain a view. So, you know, today there's I think it was published yesterday, Daniel Hannan talking about how CPTPP is going to, in the Conservative Post, is going to ensure an American trade deal. So, you know, and that's not reported in some of the left-wing press. So it's important to just keep an open mind, look at everything and have a balanced view. But I try to I'm very much anchored to the changes around our values, which come down to our food and our regulations around that, which are at threat and have been at threat since we decided to do Brexit. And for me, that is the central core part of Brexit: the welfare state, universalism, all of those things, democracy. That is what's under threat. And so if I completely leave X, then the campaigning that I'm doing is not going to be heard by other people that I want it to reach. So
do you not think there's a bit of like futility there, though, in that you could publish a devastating expose about Tory corruption, about think tanks, about factory farming, lobbyists? You could write that and publish it on X, and if the right person had Elon Musk's ear, or even like one of his, you know, supporting staff members, they could go, yeah, we don't really want people reading that, to be honest. That's not in line with our values. So we're going to stunt that, Liz. We're going to mute it. Like, it doesn't, I feel like you're fighting a losing battle by even trying to engage with the information conduit that they control. Do you know what I mean?
I guess
because a lot of the stuff that I'm campaigning on is people who are on the left and the right, or identify on both sides.
Yeah.
So I've got to be there across the board, I suppose, and it's become really even more obvious around that since the budget, because of the divisions that have been opened up in this latest culture war. So yeah, it's I think it's difficult, and I think the only conclusion I've got to is that I've just got to try and be on as many platforms as you possibly can, putting out your message and coming back on it. But there's still a lot of people, you know, I think I've probably lost about 8,000 followers since Musk nonsense has taken off and Bluesky's got better. So we'll just keep going, and you know, if there is a great transfer it's over, then and X dies, then that happens. But I don't see that it is going to die, because as a platform, which is much easier to use than Bluesky. Bluesky needs to up its game if it wants to compete.
Yeah, it does feel like the Twitter of old, doesn't it? It is clunky. I hear you. To my mind, like if it's a conversation around getting your message out there, and we accept that there are frustrations with both Bluesky and Twitter, the core components of getting your message out in the UK and getting people on side is still newspapers, even though everyone complains or laughs or mocks that nobody reads newspapers anymore. Like the headlines of the newspapers inform the agenda for LBC, Sky News, BBC Breakfast, all of them. So if press regulation were surfaced, would that not is that something that you would get behind, Liz? Like to get the message out there, that would allow you more space to win people over with farming initiatives and so on?
I think with the day of controlling the message with press regulation has gone some time ago when we lost Leveson too. And the message really is being really built on TikTok, which I'm actually really not good at because there's only so many resources you've got. I need to probably build that up a bit. YouTube, I think, is hugely powerful. And GB News, I can see Sky is now actually being eclipsed by GB News. And a lot of people say to me, oh, I can't believe you go on GB News. I'm like, well, somebody's got to go on and give a moderate view. It just doesn't make sense to sort of go, I don't like those people, so I'm not going to go and talk to them, because you've got to talk to the people that are being attracted to that and try and give them an alternative view, which is moderate, and try and get them not to be persuaded to vote for something which is going to hurt them. And
it's interesting,
and so that's what I try to do. But I realized that Keir Starmer came into office. I thought he was going to, if I'd been advising him, I would have said, Keir, the first thing you should do for the first 6 months is get the public behind you, because your ratings aren't that good, mate. And he's done the absolute polar opposite, which is handed. And I actually said this to Nigel Farage last week when I was on his show. I bet you can't believe your luck with what Keir Starmer's doing. And he stopped for about 30 seconds, and then he looked at me and he rubbed his hands and he started giggling and said, yes, this is off air. So as I said, I don't have an issue. I'm not tribal. I see something sort of completely overall, and I see my values are based around universalism, the welfare state, post-war pact, and that's what I see as under threat from a sort of American Chinese axis, with Russia probably as well, wanting a world trading system which doesn't work for Europe because of our history and our geography. And so yeah, that's kind of where I am, really. And I think if we don't go on that platform and give them another alternative view, then I don't know what will happen.
It was interesting.
But also, we're going into a system now. I think Jeremy Corbyn is going to launch a new party.
Oh, really?
With the left. That was reported in the Times last week. And we've had them coming to our farming protests under a banner of #together. They're desperate to talk to farmers and to try and use the farming argument. They've got a lot of money. And so I think we're going to be going into the next election with so many parties that only work on a proportional representation system. And we could be looking at a lottery of people, of MPs winning seats with record low numbers, which is terrifying. Because it's not going to. We've already got a very low percentage, 34% for a very large majority, and we could see a reform government with the Conservative coalition winning on a very small percentage of the vote. I don't know. It's at the moment, it's too early in the Parliament to say what could happen, but that's kind of what I'm looking at. The emphasis and priority should be put on proportional representation and trying to not allow these culture wars to divide us. But I hoped Labour were going to come into power and steer us closer back to Europe, but that is not the case. It is not the case. They're saying one thing and doing another. They're continuing with the Brexit thing.
I don't see reform getting in for a while. I think a lot of the polling has been inflated, and I think one of the polling companies they've used is dubious. I think I mean, we can even talk about their social media. It's been inflated. Their presence on the media has been inflated. It's a bubble. And it's interesting because those 4 million votes are pretty much the same. That's the height of the UKIP party. And I think in general, what we'll see is it's almost like the quote, the famous quote, "Oh, events, my boy, events." They'll do stuff that will scupper them. Richard Tice went on first to try and justify. I mean, it's actually quite wild when now thinking about it. Richard Tice went on to try and justify that MP that.
Because I don't know what he's supposed to be redeemed for at the minute. What did he do?
Well, look, the court made a decision. We rely on the court judgment, right? And you can have different opinions as to what. Look, if he agrees or disagrees with that, that's one thing. At the end of the day, the court ruled, the court made a decision, and he served his time, and now he's had a great career, and I think that's a really positive sign, where you can say to someone, if you do something stupid, you do something bad, you make a terrible mistake, but actually you can come back from it. And that, I think, is a really constructive, optimistic thing.
If it's a good thing, why don't you just say what he's done?
Because I wasn't there on the night, and there's a disagreement about it. The court made a decision. We rely on the court judgment, right?
No, I mean you're serving in Parliament.
Yeah,
with
so
him,
I'm
right?
on his side. I disagree with what else is saying.
So you don't think he kicked her then? Is that what you're saying?
I'm trusting James. He's bang on the money, and I think that what he says is right. He was there. The court wasn't there. The court made a decision. We rely on the court judgment, right? The Times weren't there.
Well, the victim was there as well, right?
Yeah, and they're going to have a disagreement. The court made a decision. We rely on the court judgment, right?
Kicked his girlfriend repeatedly in the stomach while she was on the floor and had to have 2 security guards drag him off. And it was a car crash. And you're going, wow, you keep doing stuff like that, you're not going to go anywhere. And the media definitely are inflating it. Question Time is like the obvious example. People don't trust the BBC. And I'm going to segue this slightly as well, because I want to talk about a bit more detail about Luigi Mangione and then bring it back into Nigel Farage and privatisation of the NHS. Were you aware that the media, there was a leak of the Luigi Mangione note that he left, his political note? Did you know that had to be leaked? So Ken Klippenstein was an independent journalist, and he basically said this note, which was left by Luigi Mangione, I think we can all safely say it's alleged, but looks like it is him, wasn't being released by the press.
That you were the first to publish the manifesto. You weren't the first to get your hands on the manifesto. In fact, most media had their hands on it. Explain how you made that decision to publish it when they were withholding it.
That's exactly right. The major media outlets, from the New York Times to the Post, CNN, ABC, all had their hands on this document, were sitting on it, sharing it with themselves socially, which I know from my friends at these various outlets, but refused to provide it to the general public. And so when I obtained the document and read through it, I didn't see any reason not to publish it. And so I went ahead, did that in response to what I saw as media paternalism at its worst. The judgment that this is safe for us to read, but it's not okay for the public to read.
And it clearly labeled where he was pointing the blame and making it a political statement. So it's just interesting, like, you know, we're talking about the power of whether or not the media is still there and whether or not the social media is more prevalent. In my opinion, social media is more prevalent because it's harder to suppress information. The media still seem to have that ability, but when they do stuff like this, you're going, right, you've lost more trust. People aren't going to trust you. And I think newspapers and general media are going to slowly disappear because they'll keep doing stuff like that. They'll keep making gaffes. They'll keep suppressing information. There was do you remember the Prince Andrew thing? They had the Epstein story 3 years.
Yeah.
And it was suppressed. And the lady off air claimed it was the palace that was suppressing the story and saying, we won't allow you to interview Kate and William when they have the big wedding.
I've had the story for 3 years. I've had this interview with Virginia Roberts. We would not put it on the air. First of all, I was told, who's Jeffrey Epstein? No one knows who that is. This is a stupid story. Then the palace found out that we had her whole allegations about Prince Andrew and threatened us a million different ways. We were so afraid we wouldn't be able to interview Kate and Will that also quashed the story. And then Alan Dershowitz was also implicated in it because of the planes. She told me everything. She had pictures. She had everything. She was in hiding for 12 years. We convinced her to come out. We convinced her to talk to us. It was unbelievable what we had. Clinton, we had everything. I tried for 3 years to get it on, to no avail, and now it's all coming out, and it's like these new revelations, and I freaking had all of it. I'm so pissed right now. Like, every day I get more and more pissed because I'm just like, oh my God, what we had was unreal. Other women backing it up.
If you release a story in Andrew, that's wild. So I know, I'll just say this as well, because you were talking about balanced views. They did a poll this week on the shooting. Republicans and Democrats are pretty much exactly the same viewpoint. They on the shooting. They don't like the fact that he killed the guy, but they also don't like the fact that the healthcare CEO was rejecting a third of applicants. A third. The industry standard is 16%.
Yeah,
they're rejecting 1/3. Literally, it's legalized killing. You don't have that in the NHS. You might have people making mistakes or doing bad things within the service, but they, on the whole, the vast majority are attempting to save your life, and you'll get these odd bods in there. So I think I'm trying to segue it, maybe a bit clumsily, into Luigi Mangione, but I could see a little link pushing in that direction. Any thoughts on what I was saying with the media and whether or not they're still going to be influential?
I remember this sort of metropolitan bubble around Brexit and Remain, because I'm out in conservative heartlands here. And I remember my sister, artist living in London, saying, "Oh, what are you worrying about? It's going to be fine. Everyone's going to vote Remain." And then, I was like, I really don't think that's the case, because out here it feels very different. And I think that's the difference between you guys, in that I am somebody that is very firmly left of centre. I'm completely aware of where my anchor is as well. And I think that makes me, I don't think there's many people like that who are completely aware of their anchoring and the position of where they fit into where they live and the tribalism war within that. But that's because I've lived in many different places and felt it from different places. And I think that's the problem. It's probably why I don't need to sit in a tribal bubble with people to feel comfortable on this, in that I'm able to sort of say, I'm me, and whatever goes on around me, I'm trying to sort of say, guys, listen to me, because you're making mistakes at the moment. And that's what it feels like to me. And it's felt like that since Brexit happened. Because I think before Brexit, I was always of the view we were a united left-wing liberal country, and Brexit undid all of that. But I still think that we are a left-wing liberal country, but we've become disunited by lies and misinformation, and people not understanding exactly what's going on and what's at threat. And I think the thing that is at threat is that the right-wing global forces want to have a world where the corporations can do what the heck they like and democracy doesn't get in their way. And that is answered through CPTPP. And I don't know if you've looked, but I think there's 11 countries altogether in CPTPP. Might be 12 now, we've just joined. Well, but look at the list of who wants to join. There's a whole list of people waiting to join. And just seeing Hannon's article yesterday, and that's what I see is going to happen, is that they want to replace WTO and the single market with one world trading bloc. But that opens up an awful lot of problems. A trading bloc, which means that if a national government legislates to protect citizens against a harmful product, the owners of that product can sue the national governments. I mean, wow. I mean, this is scary. That's the most scary thing that ought to be communicated, but it's being missed by all of this tribal warfare, culture war stuff. And I don't like this one, and I don't like that one. So I'm going to stay here where I feel safe with my friends. And everyone's getting confused by all of this mixed messaging. But I see that as a bigger picture and the biggest tsunami coming towards us as a rate of knots.
I feel like, so if we just sort of spool back, there's a few bits just to touch on. The thing about Luigi Mangione and the note being suppressed from being released. That doesn't surprise me at all. I feel like, particularly in America, their media is, quote, corporate media. It's owned by the same guys who own big, heartless corporations. They probably play golf and hang out in country clubs with the guys who head up the pharmaceuticals and private healthcare and health insurance industries. So it doesn't surprise me in the slightest that they would look to protect one of their own by suppressing that. We've seen very similar activity across titles like the LA Times is owned by a billionaire who asked his editorial team specifically not to, like, it's a left-wing paper over there. He was like, you can't, just don't support or endorse Kamala Harris. And then since Trump has been reelected, he said, can you write like less Trump stuff? Like, don't obsess over what Trump is doing. So we're seeing this kind of activity across. So that's the LA Times. I think the New York Times was also deliberately took a step back from endorsing Kamala Harris. The Washington Post, Jeff Bezos's newspaper, also didn't endorse Kamala Harris because these guys are all like one and the same, aren't they? It's corporate media. They're working towards their own interests. What does that mean for like over here for the UK, for the NHS, for farming? Honestly, I would see it as a sort of like sometimes on my channel we talk about like the shit British version of things, and the example that I always wheel out is like Pimp My Ride from MTV. Is like when you watch the American one, then they would have like $100,000 budget and they would like do up the car. It'd be amazing. You'd have Exhibit there like rapping along, and then you'd come and watch the UK one and it would have like a tiny budget because it's not the mass American market, right? And you'd have Tim Westwood like presenting it. It's just the shit British version.
So loud, the only thing she could hear was her engine. To resolve this problem, we're going to apply soundproofing to everything.
And I think what we're going to see in corporate media is a little British, diluted British version of what happens over in the States. I think, billionaires will buy.
That's GB News.
Yeah, they will buy up newspapers. We already see that in terms of the value that is being wrapped around the Telegraph as that is being acquisitioned. This is a newspaper that is loss-making, certainly in the print copy. It is horrendously in debt because the Barclay family took out loans and saddled the newspaper with their loans to the tune of hundreds of millions of pounds. By any normal measure, by like common sense, that newspaper should be in the fucking toilet. It should be, it's a failed business. But because of the power that newspapers hold and wield, it is being sold for around like 500, 600 million pounds. And the buyers of the newspaper are like, yeah, we'll pay off the debts for you. Yeah, all those debts that you saddled, we'll sort that. Just give us the newspaper. Give us the power and the influence. So I think you'll see more and more of that over here. And just to go back to, your earlier point, Liz, about, going on to GB News and pushing back and being the voice of reason and is moderacy a word? Did I just make that up?
We can say it is. Why not? We can create new words on the show.
Yeah.
Well, centralism, it's in the center, isn't it?
So to be the moderate on a show like that, I think it's interesting because I feel like you and I are both coming at the same problem, but from just like upward and downward pressure kind of perspective. So you see it as like, I will go on GB News and be the voice of reason. I'm from slightly over here where I'm like, I want to see a regulator with teeth rein them in from spreading their conspiracy theories. People like,
but that's not at the moment. That's Keir Starmer. I mean, this is what we hoped with a Labour government, that we would see that sort of change. But we do not have any. All he's done is unleash culture wars to divide us, and to distract us from what he's doing. And he's just continuing in a different way to Sunak, but with the same trajectory that the Conservatives were on, sadly, which means more power to the media.
Well, yeah. So another thing that I've spoken about recently is like how finite the window is for Keir Starmer's Labour Party, in the sense that, and to go back to what you were saying earlier, Alex, about whether Reform are ready or whether they could actually get into power by hook or by crook at the next general election. I think there is an excellent chance that they will form the next government, because unless Keir Starmer does rein in the press and control some of this messaging, however communist that sounds, if he doesn't get a hold on how this stuff is being funneled out to people, and being allowed to ferment in their brains as though literally everything, single thing that Labour do is a fucking disaster. If he doesn't get a hold on that, the polling will continue to collapse. His personal approval rating or disapproval rating is now at 61%, and we're only, like 5 months in? So they will continue to slide in the polls. The Conservatives will be desperate to get back into power. They don't want to sit on the opposition benches. They will do a deal with Nigel Farage and Richard Tice. And then where are we? We're in a situation very similar to Trump's America, where people will buy influence. We're seeing that already with Musk and his donation or rumored donation to Reform. People will just buy their way into UK industries. And we will see factory farming, and we will see the erosion of
we are
trust.
seeing factory farming. There's over 200 have opened up since Brexit happened. I think the only way of stopping this Reform Tory axis, I mean, it could be Reform and Lib Dems. I mean, we don't know exactly what could happen or unfold, because don't forget that the Lib Dems have got a big influence on this agenda with Paul Marshall, who is definitely at the heart of all of it, and the Orange Book. But the only way we can stop it is by Labour taking back control and putting a new leader in. Ultimately, in our system, failure is rewarded. You only have to look at Liz Truss for that, and Boris Johnson. There is no career path and we saw it with David Cameron. Everyone thought, oh, he's failed. He didn't get what he wanted. David Cameron's done, I mean, he's made a fortune since he was supposedly failed with Brexit. And the same with Boris Johnson, the same with Liz Truss, the same with Theresa May, and the same will be said with Keir Starmer. And the fact that he took money for clothes and glasses only ensures and endorses to me that that's what he cares about. Because I stood for office, and I certainly wouldn't have been taking donations for clothes at that point. There's just no way that I would have done it, because it looks dreadful. And my interest in politics is not to get rich; it's to make sure the country is stabilized.
Yeah,
and that's the problem. We've got people in power, that we've got the wrong people in power. That they're either narcissistic and they're only got self-interest. I'm not saying all of them are like that,
No.
but too many of them are like that, and the ones that are like that are rewarded. And then the donors can come in and buy them, and we don't pay politicians enough money either. So the ones that behave
60K
themselves
is
and are
more than
really good at
enough.
pumping out a message are the ones that do well.
60K is more than enough to live off. Plus, they get a second home. Like, I'm just not. I think if you can't live on 60K, something's gone wrong.
But you're looking at it from your own perspective, Al. If you're out there and you're sat there with bankers whose bonuses are, extending into 5 figures, then that's where the greed sets in, and that's where the people like Musk, as you can see how much money these billionaires have got. That's where the stink comes in. It's not a question of whether £60,000 is enough to live off. That's the wrong question. The question is, are we paying MPs enough so that they won't be open to this? And our system has allowed that to happen. And I was in New Zealand a couple of years ago, and in recent times, the British Empire went over there not that long ago, and they got rid of the people that were living there, either by giving them diseases or by actually bribing the tribes that existed within New Zealand to come into the British Empire. This is how it works.
I'm sort of thinking to myself, I hear what you're saying. I'm still thinking to myself, there are ways around some of these issues that, and I don't think I am asking the wrong question here. I think there's 2 ways of looking at it. There's your way and my way, and both can have an equal point. And I think it's what Aid was saying earlier, where you can have a top-down perspective and a bottom-down perspective in how you're dealing with the issue. I think within this, it was something we were talking about in the last episode. We were talking about the systemic issues within the UK and how it sort of breeds that. And I think maybe you're right. Maybe you could argue that they should be paid more. But then you also go, well, if they get paid more, they don't necessarily understand what it's like for the common person, and therefore they go into a bubble in this with that 100K. I think there are pluses and minuses to it. It's also, and I'll say this as well, you know, having worked in football for a long time, I always found it really weird knowing that there were people paid more than the prime minister when you know that the prime minister is doing the most important job in the country. So like Wayne Rooney was earning at one stage 250k a week.
Yeah.
That's more than the prime minister makes in a year. How do you justify that? How do you say that Wayne Rooney, as excellent a player he was, and banging goals every week, is a more important job than that of the prime minister? So I sort of get why you're saying that should elevate it and then it should lead to a reduction in corruption. And it also means that they've got a stipend at the end when they leave, because the job isn't guaranteed for more than 4 years. So like Gullis came out and said he can't get a job now.
Yeah.
Well, maybe he shouldn't be such a twat. Like, and say stupid shit. I mean, if I was a I've run an online school. There's no way I'd hire someone like that. They're an absolute liability. The stuff he was saying was insane, and you were like, "There's zero logic in what you were saying." Like,
what about if they had like a bonus structure? So like you can pay them more, but they only get the excess if they get through the 4-year or 5-year stint without like bringing Parliament into disrepute, right? So if you get busted lobbying, or it turns out that you tried to get your mate off from some sort of standards committee investigation, or you tried to illegally prorogue Parliament or whatever, like then suddenly your pension is like slashed in half, or you lose the bonus, or there should be more accountability. Like it can't be as simple and as depressing as the situation that Liz is alluding to a minute ago, where it's like, Keir Starmer comes in. He's the latest prime minister in a series of prime ministers who do a 4 or maybe 8-year stint, and then they leave. Everyone shakes their hand, then they go off on a nice, lucrative speaking tour. And I truly think that's what's the word? That's the
Ambrosia,
the career trajectory that they're all thinking of is like 4-year increments. Like if I can just hold it down, I'll just increase taxes a little bit here.
How many days was Liz Truss in number 10?
49.
And here she is. She's able to go along and earn a load of money, even though she was the worst prime minister in living history.
But Liz, it comes back to press reg, because if you regulated your GB News, you Talk TV over in America, if their broadcasters were regulated better, then she would never have a fucking chance. She'd never be able to go on.
I'm totally on side with regulating the press. I'm totally and utterly on side with Leveson being completed. But I'm real in that I recognise that Keir Starmer, even though we hoped for the Labour Party, ain't going to do it. And the only way we would get what we want is by Keir Starmer being changed. But who else is there who's prepared to lead the country and be against those who've got the money and power? And as we can see, we've got Musk now in our living rooms, literally saying he wants to influence Britain. And I just see this as a massive sooner or later do it as well. But sadly, I do it. I go into GB News and do it. I'm not, I'm happy to stand my ground and debate these things. But ultimately, I'm in the real world and I can see what is coming. And I can see how easily people get distracted by, saying to me, Liz, you've moved position. You've become right wing. I'm saying exactly the same bloody thing I've been saying for 9 years about Brexit and food and health. And I haven't moved at all. Everybody else has moved because they think Jeremy Clarkson and Nigel Farage came along to a farming rally and then they see it as right wing. And it's kind of like, actually, what's happened is Nigel Farage and Jeremy Clarkson are actually come to a rally to oppose the disaster capitalism end game of British farming.
Celebrate I do not believe for a second Nigel Farage turned up for that. He turned up to try and get some votes. I don't think he could give a flying...
I'm doing the PR spin here. This is to do with, it's not to do with Nigel and Nigel's head. It's to do with people that are following and listening to Nigel. And you've got to give him credit. He's a fantastic communicator. He makes sense to people. And being able to communicate to the public so they understand you. Because whilst we are political nerds and we're going through all of the weeds and we understand all of these things, we are very much in the minority. Most people make up their mind, as we saw with Donald Trump, about how, and with Brexit, how they feel on that day before they go in in and ticker bots go, oh, I don't like him. I don't like him. Oh yeah, he's the one. He can do it. It's that. That's what we're up against.
So just to back up your point, Aid, I would love it for that bonus if it was a referendum by the constituency and you needed 70% to get the bonus. That would be a really interesting idea. Because you were saying, how do you get, there's 40K, you better do something for the community. Because a lot of these guys, and like Nigel, you were saying about Nigel, something really interesting this week. He keeps buggering off to Clacton. I need to go over, I'm going to go down there and do a Vox Pop and just see what people think and if he's actually been around that much, as much as he seems to be claiming he is, even though we keep seeing him in the States.
Yeah.
I think, and this actually goes a little bit back again to Farage and this year, and what I was saying about Tice, that interview he held with the discussion, I think it was with Beth Rigby, on kicking that woman in the stomach by one of his MPs and then claiming Christian forgiveness should be brought in. You were like, that was a car crash. I saw Nigel Farage in another interview where he couldn't handle the commentary being made to him about this MP that kicked this woman on the floor. And he just started mouthing off about having 1 million TikTok subscribers.
Involves being honest, though. Are you not concerned that he lied about what he did?
Did he? He wasn't vetted. He wasn't vetted. James McMurdoch was one of those many candidates who wasn't vetted at all by the party. Look, I didn't know any of this when I took back over as leader.
So you said you're going to put in place the most vigorous vetting system in place now. Do you think James McMurdoch would not go through this new vetting system?
You can have your fun at Sky News. We've got 100,000 members. I've got 1 million followers on TikTok. Dame Andrea Jenkins has just joined us. She's our candidate for Greater Lincolnshire. You've had your fun. I'm off for lunch. Thank you.
Yeah.
That looks bad. That just looks like you're in a bubble, you're in an echo chamber, and you're having to not deal with the facts, but brag that you've got 1 million subscribers. And let's face it, a large chunk of them are probably Russian bots or right-wing nut jobs. So then you go, and then there was the other thing, and this is what happened this week. Farage, so they want Christian redemption for this MP that kicked a woman in the stomach 4 times and had to be yanked off her by 2 security guards. But the lady that chucked the milkshake on Farage, he's not saying that at all. He's saying the exact opposite. He wants her in jail.
Yeah.
And he's saying it's a 2-tier system. And you're like, are you mad? This is the type of stuff that I'm going, if you actually had a really decent media, if you allow people like Marina Purkis or Gemma Forte or any of us onto Question Time, this type of stuff doesn't stand up. And I think Nigel's actually been in a bit of a bubble because he's been in GB News for 4 years?
Yeah.
Everyone just kisses it, except for you, Liz. Everyone kisses his ass.
There are Labour people that there's
much
Labour
pushback.
politicians go on GB News and Labour commentators, so it's not only me. I think you're missing the point actually, and I think I've seen it recently in that the tribal thing means that you only see certain things, and so actually you've seen that stuff with Nigel because you're awake to it. But the people that are either soft, not that engaged, or that are behind him won't see the negative aspects of that. And they won't see the positive aspects of Gemma Forte or anyone else because they're already tribally cognitive dissonance attached to that view. So, I mean, I've had a lot of people say to me recently from across the spectrum that they think that Nigel is going to be the next prime minister. From people working in the city to farmers. Farmers have been saying to me, oh, we've got nothing left to vote for, so I suppose we'll have to vote for Nigel. And I sort of say, guys, he's the one that started this with Brexit. He wants the America trade deal. The America trade deal is pertinent for British farming. And then they sort of go, oh yeah. Oh, but where else do I go? Because for them, they are tribally loyal. I'm generalising because there are Labour voting loyal farmers, but there's a lot that tend to be more right wing and more socially right wing, economically left wing, and then they sort of go, oh well, but I don't like Labour because they're all urban and they don't understand the countryside. So this is the problem that we've got of the divide in the country, which has been here since since
there
since the Enclosures Act, probably,
is there
maybe,
an
I don't know.
sorry to interject. Is there an opportunity for the Greens to get involved in? Because obviously they are more environmentally conscious. You know, it's a big priority for them. That should spill out into the countryside. We're still living against the backdrop of Tory sewage pollution, not respecting the countryside, the damage of Brexit. You don't think is there no look
There's
for
a
the Greens?
there's a big misunderstanding about the environmentalists and farming. So you do have regenerative environmental farmers that are, talk about this, greener farming, which has been very buzzwordy in the last few years. But it is the case that a lot of environmentalists actually are attack farming because they blame farmers for biodiversity loss and environmental damage and all those sort of things. And so all of it is a bit of a mixed bag. So environmentalism doesn't necessarily sit side by side with farming. It ought to, but because of all of the political nonsense, it doesn't. And so there's a lot of scapegoating and things that go on. After the war, it didn't, because the priority was, oh my goodness, we've had food shortages, we need food. And everyone was like, great, go and dig up your garden and produce food and plant a load of carrots and potatoes. We're not in that zone at the moment. We might go back to it at some point. But it's there's so much noise, as I said, and to me, I can sort of map my way through it and see where we are, because I'm really worried about food supply. And the only way at the moment, with food shrinking in our country so much, and with the trade barriers with Europe and food production decreasing in Europe, the only way out of jail for us, if there is a more escalation of conflict, is food parcels from Donald Trump. And that's what I sort of see, as in, here I am sort of saying, I think we ought to be getting rid of the trade barriers of Europe at some stage. If war does break out across Europe, it might be as in, well, thank goodness we did keep relations going with Donald Trump, because we haven't got enough food here to feed ourselves. So, because food is a basic commodity that everybody takes for granted. We've you guys are younger than me, you don't remember food shortages. I do. I mean, I'm I was born not long after the war, and my grandfather was a cook in the RAF during the war. My whole brain has been built, my whole ideology has been built on that, from a political grandfather who's sort of like, don't ever take your food for granted. And that's why I am the way I am.
It's true. It's something that I'm deeply concerned about, because history says it doesn't take much for something to go wrong for the whole of Europe to end up in a conflict. And the one thing that I saw, and I was so relieved on, was that it didn't escalate, was the missile that landed in Poland that took out, I think it actually took out a residential area. And you're going, holy shit. That's the type of stupid shit that could cause a war. I mean, World War I is literally caused because of a date. So, like the Archduke went on a date with his girlfriend because he couldn't go on a date in Hungary. So he went to Serbia because he wanted to show her off in public. She gets shot, and then it all kicks off. But it's an excuse because everyone wants it. I think I'm concerned about food security. End of. And I think anything that hinders that, has the potential to hinder that, concerns me. And I definitely don't want corporate manufactured food like by BlackRock or any other big companies coming in. And it already has happened. I mean, they're already here. They're already expanding. They're already buying land. But, it's interesting with the Greens, when we hear about biodiversity being damaged in the UK by farming. I mean, there's other factors for sure. I mean, cars alone must be damaging it. And I'm also a bit concerned that if we ended up having corporations instead of individual farmers, I think the biodiversity would be even more damaged. I think, because you get at least with farming now, you don't get monoculture cropping, but with corporate farming, they will. I mean, one of the most crazy things I ever saw when I was in the States, I think we drove for 8 hours through corn, non-stop corn. Can you imagine? You literally thought you were in an episode of The Twilight Zone, because it was just corn for hours. It was just like, what the hell is this? And we died. Is this heaven? Is it? But when you've got something like that across the UK,
one of our farm workers has gone out to work in Australia, in Albany, and he's earning £2,500 a week. I mean, you wouldn't get that a month in farm work in Britain, and well, you wouldn't get
Why
it
are you
probably
still
in a
here?
fortnight, in 2
Why have you
months.
not gone? Why you there's £2,500
He's telling me about the fact he's putting in 16-hour shifts in tractors, just driving through massive fields. And I sort of said, oh my God, you could just go to sleep in your tractor then. But, you've got three problems: spiders, snakes, and then there are huge, apparently, you can drive into huge channels. And so he had one where he drove into a channel and suddenly found himself upside down in his tractor. So, but yeah, there's huge amount of money being pumped into food production in Australia and in USA. So and we are in Europe, it's being pulled back. And so if you were going to do that world system, then it would probably have to be that, wouldn't it? Because it would be like, you're going to get your hormone fed stuff now and everything else, and you're going to eat what the Americans eat, which is very depressing. And we'll have no way of stopping it. The same as we have no way of stopping the shit in our rivers. It's the same thing. So I really find it uncomfortable, but I can't see a way of stopping it now. I think it's going to happen.
Is there like a silver lining where if you did have a almost global trade deal set up block where everyone's eating the same kind of food, like that it could be A, more equitable, and B, that you would have a seat at the table that decides this sort of stuff, like almost like a sort of EU situation, but like globally? Is there an opportunity for that?
I don't think so, Aid, because we've got that with clothing. The only way you actually get a way to influence it is if you've got money. So if you look at the clothing industry, you go to Zara, you can buy something, okay, it looks fine, and but you're not eating it, you're wearing it.
Yeah.
Whereas if you're rich, you go to Knightsbridge and you buy a jumper which is thousands of
Well, I
pounds,
mean,
which costs 30 quid
you
in
can
Zara.
get free clothes, but you just have to get into politics to get the free clothes.
Yeah, glasses. But ultimately, that's what I think they want, very much a two-tiered system. And that's what is happening at a frightening pace, actually. And the European system isn't that. It is more, it's not perfect by any stretch, but it is a lot more, there's not a lot more chance of equality than what we're going into, which is going to be really a step backwards to pre-Victorian era, I think, of really a sort of domination of barons and just ants. And AI is only going to enable that even more. And they're really wanting to make Britain more of a services industry. The Labour government could have come after the tax loophole for lawyers and architects for LLPs.
In the UK, an LLP, limited liability partnership, is a type of business structure often used by law firms. It works like a partnership, where partners share profits and responsibilities.
Which would have raised billions for the supposed black hole, but they didn't. And it is more about food and culture wars that we're seeing. So I feel very politically homeless, a bit bleak about what the future holds, unless
you're in the Rejoin EU party.
Split in the Labour Party, get everyone to join the EU party.
Yeah.
That would be nice, but we need, at the moment, we're at the beginning of the parliament. The only way we could change the dial is if enough people in the Labour Party got rid of the current leadership, and we got somebody in who was on this seat, perhaps part of the Labour for EU movement. My gypsy forebearers given me this ability to read the future, which I sometimes wish I didn't have, and so that's why I sense where we are.
I'm just gonna, we're coming to the end, so I'm gonna bring up a final topic, which is I just wanted to cover something that we slightly touched on with Luigi Mangione, slightly touched on why I think reform are going to have a problem, and that's the privatization of the NHS. Because we've obviously been talking about corporations and corporations in farms and farming. I'm hearing constantly from Farage he wants privatization. He's been saying that since 2012. And originally, I think it was only 2 years ago, he was talking about a US system. Then he realized that the UK public really hated the idea of having that implemented. Like, along with chlorinated chicken and all these other US products that we do not want here. It's really interesting to see that the public have this sort of animosity towards certain American products. Well, that would include this healthcare. This is a little bit of Christmas hope. If they continue to go on the track of we want to privatize healthcare, I think there's our inroad to really hammering the Reform Party, potentially forever, by just saying they want to privatize the NHS. They want you paying $2,500 in excess charges for an X-ray, $500, 500 quid for IVF, 200 quid for a blood test, £1,000 for an X-ray. I'm going to throw this over to Aid.
Okay, so private healthcare. I mean, I think it was Dominic Cummings who described the NHS as the closest thing to a national religion in the UK. So I think if any conversation is broached around privatization, like full-on privatization of the NHS, where it is no longer free at the point of access, I think that's a nail in the coffin for whichever party is going to market with that idea. That doesn't mean that we won't start to see an expansion of privatization throughout the healthcare industry. So they will start to wind down certain treatments that historically have been accessible under the NHS. So yeah, technically it's free at the point of access because you go into your doctors, but then they'll say you can't actually get this on the NHS any longer. Do you have Bupa? You don't. Okay, well you're fucked. So I think you'll see a little bit more of that kind of stuff creeping through. We've already seen what the state of NHS dentistry is like. I think you'll see that start to spill into the GP and social care home industries. When Liz was saying a second ago about, looking forward into the future and it all looking quite bleak, I'm very much of the same or a similar sensibility, where I look at how the cards are laid today and what the future will look like if those cards continue to expand and mature into the future as they are, like if nobody obstructs or frustrates them. And I think basically where we're at the moment is, we've got Keir Starmer, we've got Wes Streeting. I don't think either of them have exhibited any vision for what they actually want to do with the NHS or how they would fix it. I think to some extent they're tempered by the national debt, by the lack of money in the tax coffers, an aging population, a lack of younger working people. They can't bring in immigrants to plug that skills gap, to work, to earn the money, to have it taxed, to then have the money to continue to pay for the NHS. So, I mean, look, I think things are going to get worse, a lot worse. And I think privatization will probably feature in some capacity, if not like literally frontline NHS, then you'll start to see it creep in through the back door more and more.
Which is wild considering 2014, 2010, 2017, the NHS was voted as the world's #1 medical service. And now we're in this situation where we're starting to have these conversations about what we do with it. What are your thoughts, Liz?
Yeah, I mean, we've had privatization in the health system by stealth for years. I mean, Blair really started it by pushing out the foundation status, and Thatcher before that began it as well. So it's been incremental. But I think it's under the coalition government, we saw the Circle hospitals open up here. That's an American healthcare company, come over here, and they did that sort of hybrid thing of, because the NHS hospitals are full, you can go into this. I mean, I had that happen because I had to have a shoulder operation, and I ended up having an appointment in this private hospital, which had brand new, built near Bath in an industrial estate, to have my shoulder done on the NHS. I mean, I have to say it was really very efficient. But I thought, when would that have been? Probably 2018. I thought, actually, this is 2017. This is the way it's going to go. They're going to remove the rug of the make it low, and that's what's happened with the dental. We've seen what they've done with the dental system. They've done it with the eyes as well. We used to have free eye care when I was a child. Everybody used to have NHS glasses and so forth. That's gone completely now. And we know with the veterinary system that's become as well the same. If you're not insured, then you just get stung. And if you've got an old dog, you can't get insurance, even though you've paid for all of that insurance. Then you've got to dig deep as well on top of it. So it's a horrible system unless you are uber wealthy. And I think it's really, really depressing and upsetting that these values are here under the they're in the bonfire, really. And I can't see Labour under the current leadership changing where we are.
You see, that's the thing, but that still gives me. I'm trying to have some Christmas cheer here, guys.
Sorry.
I was just going to say, like, just a quick fact check here. So unless you're super wealthy, I feel like you actually want to stay in the middle ground there. So like if you're broke, you kind of screwed. No healthcare for you. If you're super wealthy, you might actually get shot on a New York street. So you want to stay in the middle if you can. That's the healthy
High
spot.
achiever.
Yeah. Wasn't that wild how quickly the police suddenly reacted to a shooting in New York and they caught him in 6 days? And it makes me go, do you reckon all the big CEOs and tech giants were like calling each other in panic? Like, was that you? Did you issue that hit?
About accelerationism, and I think that's what we are in. We've got an acceleration of mass consumerism, and eventually it is just like V for Vendetta. Eventually, you can see it leading to another revolution where the people will pull everything down, I think, because they'll feel so lost and they won't have anything to aim at. But then I think about Singapore, which really is, that's what they have in Singapore, is that system. But maybe it works in smaller countries and it doesn't work in bigger countries. I don't know. But America is it, and America's a big country and it's still there, and they've just got these horrible divisions. So I don't know where mass capitalism ends. I don't know.
You see, that's where I get the bit of hope with Nigel Farage going on this privatization gambit. I don't know why he thinks that's going to work. I think it's so entrenched here with the NHS, and as you said, it's a religion. But it's also a successful operation. Like, there's no arguing with it. If it's hit number one repeatedly over a decade when there was austerity kicking in, you're going, wow, that really works. And who wants to have a system where, in America, it's 28 million Americans have no cover. It's like because they can't afford it or because they're self-employed. And you're going, how do you sell that to people?
But you're not
I think that could bring him down.
You're not thinking
Liz,
about
you're meant to end on like hope.
Sorry. And just a bit of thing about why people vote for Farage. You have to understand why. Because they feel as if he's the person they're voting for to go and have a pint with in the pub. They're not thinking about healthcare or anything else. It's a tribal thing. It's kind of like, and that's why people voted for Boris Johnson.
I'm going to give
because
hope
they feel they like him.
I'm going to push back with more hope. I had, for the first time ever on YouTube, comment which said, because I did a video partly on this, which said, if Nigel Farage, I was considering voting for Nigel Farage. If he's privatised the NHS, he's just lost my vote. I have never, ever seen that before on any video. And again, it could be just someone making it up and lying. But I found that so odd. And again, that's our bit of hope. Right, I'm going to end there before you say anything else that's negative.
He'll have on there on his manifesto, I'm going to privatise the NHS. He'll just have what Keir Starmer had with the farming, a blank sheet underneath the NHS. It won't say very much.
Well, I mean, Trump did manage to get away with that. What was it, 9 years? He's never come up with a plan for the medical system, and no one's picked it up. I thought that would have been a vote winner in the States if Kamala Harris had actually said, right, we're going to sort out the healthcare system. We're going to bring everyone on board. If she'd done that, which would have been almost near impossible if she'd said it, that could have been a win. Right, on that note, thank you to my guests. Merry Christmas, everyone. If you like what you saw today, have a look at their channels in the description and hit that like and subscribe button. Merry Christmas, everyone.